Hi, welcome back to the Memos to the President. I'm Ylli with the Special Competitive Studies Project. It's really an honor today to have Michèle Flournoy as our guest. Welcome, Michèle.
Good to be here.
Since leaving the department where you served as the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, you have the reputation as somebody that is really thinking about the future of warfare, the future of the department, the future of workforce. So I really wanted to have you today to talk about all these issues. Let's start first with the article you had just recently in Foreign Affairs, where you argue about rapid adoption of AI for the military purposes. Can you talk to us a little bit about why is that important?
Well, if we truly believe that we are in a strategic competition, particularly with China, but also others, it really matters how quickly we adopt cutting-edge technologies that are going to be sources of advantage in the future. And AI is certainly one of them, if not the most important one. When I look at the department, it has been slow to become AI ready.
Right.
Our data isn't organized as it should be. Parts of the department haven't moved to the cloud. We haven't ensured we have the compute power that we're going to need. And so I wanted to try to bring the issue down to earth by talking about the specific use cases where AI could really give our military an advantage, whether it's predictive maintenance on systems or assisting better intelligence and command and control, or human-machine teamings to ensure that one human being can control large swarms of drones. So there's lots of different applications, and we can't sit still. Our adversaries are moving out on this, and we want to make sure that we keep our edge.
No, I agree with you, and I think when you look back, the department was early to recognize the importance of AI. I mean, when you had Jake before the ChatGPT moment. So if the department accelerated the adoption, I think the department would really be ahead of this. But now I think it found the situation where they are catching up in terms of adopting AI. So you think AI will be a force multiplier in how it's applied to the military operation?
Absolutely. First of all, what we're seeing is overwhelming amounts of intelligence and information coming in from both classified and unclassified sources. It's truly overwhelming for analysts. AI can help us separate the wheat from the chaff. It can recognize patterns of behavior that it would take hours, days, months, years for an analyst to find. And so it can be a pointer to where should the analyst focus, where's the high value insight going to come from. And so that process will hopefully assist decision making. I think AI can also help in terms of building the resilience of our C4ISR system, ensuring that the right information gets to the right people at the right moment, helps to nominate best pairing of targets and weapon systems. And then again, the human-machine teaming piece is going to be really key. When you think about the Chinese challenge, any scenario is going to be involve us going into their backyard to try to defend our interests or our allies. They are necessarily going to have an advantage in mass. The one way that we can buy, one of the few ways we can buy back mass affordably and quickly is through the pairing of manned and unmanned systems.
Right. If you were the leader today in the Pentagon or one of the 4 stars, what would be the best way to sort of get after this issue?
I think, if
I
were queen for day, I would say let's do a 90-day sprint where we're going to do a deep assessment of all the gaps in the readiness of the Pentagon to adopt AI with speed and scale. And I would bring outsiders in to help do that. And then I would make as one of the highest priorities a goal that by the end of this next few years, the department is going to be fully utilizing AI across multiple functions and use cases as an enterprise. And I would just systematically go after the barriers, knock down those barriers. Some of that's going to require realigning incentives. Mm-hmm. People are afraid of AI. They don't understand it. Many people who are in charge of implementing it haven't ever used it.
Right.
They don't know what it can do. They don't know what they don't know. And so I think it's going to require education, it's going to require training, and then it's going to require realigning incentives to ensure that people in the acquisition and contracting world understand the technology, understand how to incorporate it, understand the authorities, the flexible authorities they have to actually get it quickly, and really get rewarded and promoted and advanced for mastering that rapid adoption.
You've been a long advocate of human capital. Obviously, this doesn't just hit the acquisition folks, but how we do doc training and training
Yes.
and exercises. So, what would be your recommendations for that, profession among the military members?
So we have done best as a military innovating under duress, but we don't want to wait for a disaster or a crisis to happen. So the question is, how can you create a healthy competitive environment where I think you create lots of small groups across the services, the COCOMs, and you give them tools, you give them challenges, and you say, have at it. Whoever comes up with the best ideas and the best solutions, we're going to funnel those up, and the best ones are going to be implemented as a matter of priority. And you incentivize people to get in there, roll up their sleeves, innovate not only on the technology, but on the operational concepts. Understand all of the DOTML PF, the doctrine, organization, training, et cetera, all the elements that take that technology and make it into an operational capability that a COCOM can actually use.
Right. Let's switch gears a little bit to another topic. You wrote another important piece recently on issues surrounding Taiwan, and I think in that piece you argue that time is running out to actually have a good vision about what to do around the problem set of Taiwan. Can you elaborate more on your thinking, and why do you think that time is running out?
Sure. So, I'm the first person to say that, I do think President Xi wants this to be his ticket to go down in the history books. I mean, obviously, his COVID performance won't get him there. His economic performance won't get him there. But reunifying Taiwan or bringing Taiwan into, be under Beijing is his big goal. I think it's very clear he wants to try to do that with political coercion, economic coercion, shrinking Taiwan's international space. However, if he's running out of time in terms of his tenure and it's not been accomplished, he has instructed the PLA he wants ready options by 2027. Now, whether that's actually, that timeline slips or not, it doesn't mean that he'll actually use force in 2027. But what it does mean is that we need to be ready to be confident in our deterrence by 2027, so that every day he wakes up and thinks about using force against Taiwan, he decides, not today, it's too risky, I might fail.
Right. Okay, so let me talk first about what we need to do, Michèle, and then we'll talk about what the Taiwanese need to do. It's 2025, February 2025. So if you think about the timelines that Xi Jinping has put in ahead of him, we have about 2 years or less so to be ready. What does it mean to be ready in our context? With our allies and partners, obviously, in this.
So I do think there's several things. Number one, right now, I think we get a lot out of what people call reputational deterrence. We are the best military in the world. We have the most combat experience. We have exquisite technologies. We have the best people, no question. But that won't be enough. And so there's a lot in the defense program that will come online in the 2030s and beyond, and that will shore up deterrence. But there is this window. And I think in the window, what it is, it's taking existing platforms and marrying them with new capabilities to get better outcomes. And so, again, if you take existing manned platforms and you give, whether it's undersea, on the sea, or in the air, you have human operators that know how to use drone swarms to greatly complicate and confuse Chinese attack planning and actual execution. If it's using AI to speed intelligence, surveillance, processing of information, teeing up of options, marrying targets to systems, to the extent we can get speed, we get decision with accuracy.
Right.
We get decision advantage, and that could be very important. And then, enabling a C4ISR system that is robust under a constant attack and efforts to degrade with electronic warfare, cyber attacks, et cetera, space attacks even, to make sure we have the right compute at the edge and we have AI that can help kind of switch and the flows of information to give us the resilience we need. So those are just some examples. But again, this has to be done very quickly.
Yeah. And Congress has a role to play here as well? No,
Absolutely. I mean, I think Congress should be credited. They've given the department tremendously flexible authorities that are not being fully used.
Utilized, yeah.
I do think Congress could be even more helpful by allowing the department more flexibility in terms of moving money within the portfolio of AI investments. So if we start to see something's not working, but something else is, it's a relatively small dollar amount, usually, like allow us some flexibility to move. Yes, report, be transparent, let you know it's happening, but not have to go ask Mother May I for moving every, $1 million increment or what have you.
Right. Let's talk about the Taiwanese a little bit, because obviously this is something in which they have been investing for a while. Are they investing in the right capabilities, Michèle? What else they should do in the meantime?
I think they are increasingly moving in the right direction. They understand that they have to make themselves more of a porcupine with a very layered defense, asymmetric defense. They're not going to be able to take on the Chinese by themselves, but their job is to buy time, to make it slow and arduous and painful for the Chinese to approach them or to come onto their territory. And so I do think they are buying some of the right systems. I think they're getting a lot of good advice and counsel from many quarters. But I do think that there's more that they need to do, particularly in the realm of munitions, unmanned systems, and again, layered defenses. So sometimes the big shiny object is not the right purchase. Sometimes it is the small, the large numbers of small attritable things that it's actually going to buy you what you need.
Right. You wrote a lot, I think, and you spoke a lot about the lessons learned from Ukraine that can be applicable in the Asia theater. Can you talk about some of the things that really, from the beginning of the invasion until today, showed you and I think provided proof that there are things that we can learn from what's going on in the Ukraine context that is replicable in the Asia context?
Yeah, I think one lesson is it has to be a whole-of-nation response. I'm guessing that one key thing that surprised Vladimir Putin is that the Ukrainians resisted, and the whole population sort of stood up and said no. That's got to happen in Taiwan as well, if this ever, God forbid, happens. Secondly, I do think we saw how vulnerable Russian logistics were. And for the first time last summer, we saw the Chinese exercising the logistics aspects of trying to come across the Taiwan Strait. That is a point of vulnerability. It's even harder at sea than it is on land, and that should be an absolute focus. Third is we saw the benefits of having started to work seriously with Ukraine after the invasion of Crimea in 2014. So we really need to be working closely in building up the human capital and the training and proficiency of the Taiwanese armed forces. And then, again, unmanned systems. The drone war and the counter-drone war in Russia-Ukraine has been a great learning lab and cautionary tale.
Right.
And I think Taiwan needs to be much more prepared both on the offense and defensive side of that equation.
So, Michèle, we talked a little bit about lessons learned from Ukraine in terms of how whole-of-nation approach to building that resilient resistance against the Russian invasion. And I think the best demonstration of that was really in building the drones. I think President Zelensky spoke in terms of thousands of drones they produce, I think, monthly. And I think the number is like 2 million a year, something like that. Why do you think we're struggling to adapt to this new environment and build more drones faster?
First of all, I think our initial experience with drones has been at the very high end, the most exquisite technology, which helped us win the war on terror, actually. I mean, helped us defeat al-Qaeda. But we are not so comfortable with, traditionally, the sort of low-cost, attritable, multi-purpose drones that you're seeing in Ukraine and that we will need in the Indo-Pacific. I give huge kudos to Deputy Secretary Kathleen Hicks, who who started this replicator program to try to force the system to go after these smaller attritable systems, specifically for the Indo-PACOM use case. But she fought tooth and nail, and it's going to hopefully result in thousands, but we need something much bigger and much more broader than that. And so I think the time has come for really looking at the systemic barriers, and again, realigning incentives. And I do think it's at the, helping people understand the technologies that are out there, motivating development of new operational concepts, rewarding that, but also training and rewarding some segment of the acquisition contracting cadres to really get good at rapid innovation adoption. Mm-hmm. And we just haven't done that yet. And, right. And as long as it's, direction from above is great, but if someone has been trained and promoted based on being risk averse, keep everything on cost and on schedule and never disrupt a program, you're not going to get the speed and agility that we need.
Right. Thank you. Switching gears a little bit, we have the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who was just confirmed, and I think this is his second week probably in the job. The DoD, as you know, the first year has to build the national defense strategy that traditionally follows a national security strategy. What do you think should be the key pillars of the new national defense strategy?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a lot of things that will compete for his time and attention from day one. I would recommend that he focus first and foremost on the question of how do we deter conflict with China and protect our allies and interests. Because, if you ever actually had a U.S. China conflict over Taiwan or anywhere else, it's going to be World War III. It's going to be catastrophic for the global economy, for everybody. So the name of the game is preventing that from happening. I think there's a lot that we can do to shore up deterrence, as we've been discussing. I also think we have to, with a new administration coming in, we have to communicate very clearly to the Chinese a message of resolve. While you have many of the Trump administration appointees being very hawkish on China, very clear about the importance of deterring China, the president himself has not said much on this issue. And some of the things he has said, like, Taiwan stole our chip technology. Not true, but that's what he said. They should be paying us more for their defense. Again, not yet communicating a strong message of resolve that if Taiwan is attacked unprovoked, the United States will come to its defense, as will our allies. That resolve piece is just as important as the capabilities part of deterrence.
I think the joint U.S.-Japan statement indicates our common position regarding Taiwan. I think that was a big win, I think, in the last
I think
couple
having
of days.
Japan step up, Australia step up. Right. I mean, China has to understand they will not only encounter the United States, they will encounter some of our most important allies in a network.
Right.
Yeah.
Another topic that really is current right now is having DoD launch some kind of a Manhattan Project for AI. Now, we talked earlier about AI adoption, and I think for the first time, the department finds itself really behind the curve here in terms of staying ahead of innovation.
Yeah.
When you look at Cold War, and we talked about this before, DoD was the center of innovation. Most of the things happened through DoD labs, but now it's playing catch up. So do you think having DoD lead a project like that merits attention now and effort?
Absolutely. I think when you look at all the emerging technologies that are out there, I would say AI and maybe synthetic bio are the two that will have just very broad, multifaceted effects across the enterprises. And I think so a Manhattan type project that really gets senior leader focused, puts the right incentives in place, clears away the bureaucratic obstacles, engages the key private sector partners, and really drives towards outcomes within a certain time frame. I think that's really important. Now, obviously, alongside that, you've got to have the right policy development. You've got to make sure we continue to develop the guardrails and the governance for keep AI, responsible AI, and all of that. But we have to move faster. And I think trying to use the current system to do that without some sort of extraordinary effort is It's just not going to work. It's not going
Right.
to get us there fast enough.
Right. Another issue that I think both on the drones piece and AI piece and the munition piece is sort of like the atrophy of our defense industrial base.
Yeah.
And I think you have to do two things at the same time. We're moving into like the advanced manufacturing era because I think robots will be so like a center feature in the
Yeah.
future of this. But also like we're still dealing with munition. We're still
Yeah.
dealing with traditional weapons capabilities. So what do you think is the right balance there, and what do you think we should do next?
Well, I think the most acute and immediate problem is the munition shortage in the wake of a combination of supplying Ukraine and expending lots of munitions against Iranian drones,
Right.
the Houthis, et cetera. But the fact is that we have always under-procured munitions. I mean, I remember when I was in the Office of the Secretary of Defense going to meetings, and every time there was a budget crunch, the services would take down their munitions buys to keep their big ticket items whole. And the secretary would have to say, no, you got to put that back in,
Right.
find another bill payer. But so we chronically under-resource munitions buys. Then you add to that these real-world drains on our stockpiles, and then you add to that the fact that Congress basically budgets year by year for these things. And when you budget year by year, the defense industrial base is going to adopt a just-in-time delivery, no flexibility, no surge capacity type of posture, because that's how they're being resourced. So I think it was a big step forward that the last administration got Congress to give them some multi-year munitions procurement authority to help restock.
Right.
But again, we've got to accelerate that. At the same time, we've got to be bringing in, and much more quickly, many of the non-traditionals, like you suggested, people who are bringing in robotics, not only into our capabilities, but into the actual manufacturing process. Yeah.
So we talked about China. Michèle, let's talk a little bit about Russia. I think Presidential Envoy Keith Kellogg will present his plan in the coming days at Munich Security Conference. But what do you think that should look like? What would be your advice to how that plan should look like?
Well, I do. I applaud President Trump's interest in trying to end a horrific conflict that never should have happened. However, the terms on which this ends really, really matters. If Putin walks away feeling that he's, won or gotten a good portion of Ukraine, he will be back with future aggression, either to get the rest of Ukraine or to go after Moldova, or pick your scenario. So he has to pay a price for this. And bottom line, we have to ensure that this never happens to Ukraine again. The biggest problem I see is that I don't think Putin has any interest in actual negotiations. I think he still is hearing from his military advisors that he's winning, and that if he just holds out long enough, the Western support's going to collapse. The Ukrainians are going to get tired. His economy's hurting, but it can keep withstanding the pressure. And if he just hangs in there, he's going to win.
Right.
And I think that is the biggest problem. I do think if they could get him to some kind of deal where it's a sort of frozen lines of conflict without acknowledging that the Russian-held territories are actually part of Russia, but it's sort of like an armistice where you defer that issue to the future. We're going to need to give Ukraine some kind of security guarantee. And I think for the West and for the U.S., is that a true path to NATO membership, to EU membership? Is it something else? And what is the enforcement mechanism? What's going to be on the ground to ensure that Russia doesn't violate any agreement? Is there a buffer zone? Who monitors that? There's so many questions. I think the really important thing for the Trump administration is they've got to bring our European allies into this conversation. If Europe feels like this was concluded over their heads, it's forced down Ukraine's throat, and now they're supposed to send, troops to a buffer zone or pay for Ukrainian reconstruction, it's not going to work. And so this is really complicated. I wish it could be solved in 24 hours, as the
Yeah,
president
yeah.
promised, but I don't think that's likely.
Right.
And the terms really matter. And no agreement is better than a really bad agreement.
Right. Two other issues that I think will probably be captured in the national defense strategy would be the North Korea issue, which I think has been going on for many, many years.
Yeah.
So would welcome your thoughts about North Korea. And then lastly, the situation in Middle East. First, in the aftermath of October 7th attack, but also the dynamics around Iran.
Yeah. On North Korea, I always worry whenever Kim Jong-un feels like he's out of the headlines and not getting attention. That's
needs
when
attention.
he does some kind of provocation to force that. In my day, it used to be on either Thanksgiving evening or Christmas Eve or New
July
Year's
4th,
Eve
yeah.
or July
Yeah.
4th. Yeah, just to be as irritating as possible. The thing that's worrying me the most right now about North Korea actually is this axis that's formed with Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And, I can only imagine that in exchange for North Korea sending troops to the front line in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia is promising or providing some kind of high-end technology for either their nuclear program, their missile program, and so forth. And that is really worrisome because in the past, North Korea has been somewhat constrained by just the technological hurdles they struggled to get over. So that worries me. On the Middle East, I think the key question is what does the day after agreement for Gaza look like? And Netanyahu has failed to have a vision for that. I think, President Trump's announcement that we would buy, own, and redevelop Gaza as some sort of resort in the Middle East, disregarding the fact that that's home to 2 million plus Palestinians and who've been forcibly removed from their homes in the past. It's a non-starter. It's managed to irritate and offend some of our closest Arab friends and allies. So I think people really have to get serious about how does this war come to some kind of end. And if President Trump really wants to get to his goal of expanding the Abraham Accords to include some kind of reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Israel, they have to come up with a viable solution for the Palestinians. I'm not saying it's easy. It's really hard. It's eluded us for decades.
Right.
But we have to wrestle that to the ground because the statements that have made so far kind of play right into the hands of the extreme right in Israel, who talks about just eliminating the Palestinian problem, getting them out of out of the West Bank, out of the Gaza, into other countries, and then Israel annexes all of that land. That is just not going to happen, and it's not a productive line of policy.
Right. And Iran, last question.
Iran is in a very weakened position after the war in Gaza and Lebanon, and its proxies, particularly Hezbollah, are in a very weakened position. That fact has sparked inside Israel a debate about whether now is the time to actually try to take out Iran's nuclear program. There are all kinds of issues with that. I think some Israelis believe that Iran would play the victim and not respond. I think most U.S. analysts believe that would start a Middle East war. There's also all the tactical challenges that, Israel probably can't do it all by itself, so would have to rely on the United States to assist. Even if you took out the facilities, it would only, set back the program a couple of years. So it's a very fraught thing, but I do think this is going to be put on President Trump's desk, as it was, before in the Obama administration. When Trump signed this recent executive order reinstating the reimposition of maximum pressure, the language he used was, I think he expressed he was sorry or sad or reluctant to do this. I can't remember the exact words he used, but he was clearly signaling, in my sense, that he would consider a negotiation, that he might want to see if he can negotiate a better deal with Iran.
Right.
So stay tuned.
Thank you. This was a great overview of all the challenges, I think, facing our country and, more importantly, Department of Defense. Last question that I ask almost every guest is, You have been a mentor to so many young professionals over the years. What would be the one key, or what is the one advice you give to all of them? Why is it important to serve?
Well, first of all, I tell them that the reward you get from serving your country is unmatched by any other, financial form of compensation. It's invaluable, it's priceless, and it stays with you for the rest of your life. But the other piece of advice I always give them is choose the boss, not the job.
I say the same thing.
I have turned down the perfect job descriptions to serve with the most extraordinary people, and that has always, served me well and enabled me to have much more growth and impact than I could have had I just chose the perfect job description.
With that, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been really an honor to have you. We had a great conversation about all the challenges facing our country and AI on top of that, so I appreciate it, and thank you again.